One thing that we're going to talk about is the supply chain and the defense industrial base. So if you're not familiar with the defense industrial base, these are anyone that's doing business with the federal government. So that's R&D, that's design, that's production, delivery, maintenance. It could be just systems, software, subsystems, components, parts, any weapon systems that are out there, and anything and everything that needs to meet any U.S. military requirements is considered part of the defense industrial base. And so when we talk about the supply chain, it's important for us to highlight at a broader impact what that looks like in the defense industrial base. Typically, we see these interconnected supply chains, and there's risk because of that in the supply chain to the defense industrial base, because those third-party vendors, the subcontractors, the software providers, the cloud services, maybe some logistics that are happening. It really comes down to what is the weakest link. Next slide. If you just take a look at what you see on the screen right here, the prime contractor is over on the left-hand side, and they're making the helmet and part of the cockpit for the airplane. And then underneath the hood of each one of those elements is a litany of different subcontractors who can make different things that the prime just can't source. And so there's a whole bunch of ways that we see these primes subtasking out many of the components, and each one of these components could be the potential weakest link. Some examples of those supply chains could be like food service providers, or construction, maybe office equipment, or any telecom that's out there. And if we get into the disruption and some of the corruption or the compromising or ways that things are happening, those become significant risks that could affect the supply chain in totality. And I think the United States has gotten fed up, or at least the military has gotten fed up with the lack of security, or a baseline level of security, for not only the prime contractors, but the subs and the subs of the subs, and anybody who really comes into play for the supply chain. And why do I say that? Because safeguarding the information is critical. Check this out. Over on the left-hand side, we have a couple of aircrafts. There's the F-35. The plans were stolen for the F-35, and magically, the Chinese came up with this J-31 that they call it, that looks very, very similar to that F-35. In addition to that, we have the Humvee, and those plans were stolen as well to look almost identical, if not identical, to the Humvee that the Chinese have. And the idea of safeguarding information is super critical because it protects the sensitive data from unauthorized access, threats, and manipulations. There's some reasons why that information security is so essential, because it prevents data breaches, will ensure compliance, it protects privacy, and maintains business continuity. Really, I think it builds trust and the reputation, as well as it prevents spying and espionage, or maybe sabotage. And in our ecosystem, it supports the competitive advantage. And so when we start to think about how we can begin to safeguard information, the idea of cybersecurity really following compliance isn't just good practice, it's the law. And just like in the Wild West, if you don't have a sheriff or somebody who's enforcing strong cybersecurity governance, then the bandits would win. And so along comes the 800-171 and CMMC. 800-171 is the ultimate defense playbook for protecting controlled unclassified information, or CUI, from the bad guys, the cyber threats that are out there. Whether you're a prime contractor or a small supplier, or maybe you're safeguarding sensitive data. It just is best practice. And it gives us a baseline level of security that's mission critical requirement. That is dovetailed with the CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. Both of those together ensure that every link in this supply chain is ironclad. It prevents breaches, secures the national defense, as well as keeping the organizations compliant, resilient, and hopefully ahead of the curve. Ultimately, we want to practice good cyber hygiene. And by being good stewards of the government's information, we can do that with the enforcement of the NIST 800-171 and the CMMC. I remember growing up seeing a few movies. One of them was The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and the other one is Tombstone. And you may recall either one of these, and if not, you should probably check out them. But really, there is a new sheriff in town, and you know it's taken a while to kind of get here. But with the enforcement of and the publication of the CMMC, it really comes into play. And you know, back in the 1800s, U.S. frontier towns had lawless stretches of land where bandits roamed freely. That changed when you know the federal marshals actually enforced order, and that's similar to what we have here with CMMC. The Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification is the new sheriff in town in defense contracting, and so it ensures that only secure companies handle sensitive data. Because of those recent breaches that have given blueprints out to our adversaries, and it proves that the supply chain security is a national security issue. If that's not enough, the defense industrial base really is one of the main targets. In our industry of cybersecurity, we call it open source intelligence. And that means that the battlefield is pretty much everywhere. The defense industrial base and anyone that's doing business with it is really under siege right now. The cyber adversaries don't care where they get the data from. They just want the data, and they're knocking at the front door. And because of that, they're either probing for weaknesses in the defense industrial base, or they're looking to plant things in the smallest suppliers that would eventually trickle up to the prime contractors. And so no one is off limits. These can include, but not be limited to, the state-sponsored hackers, the cybersecurity criminals, and insider threats. And this is not just a warning, this is mission critical. And so how do we go about looking at what are some of the things that are at stake? Let's go to the next slide and talk about that. So check it out. The adversaries aren't just looking for classified secrets. They're going through everything and mining the data that fuels the defense industrial base. The information's being targeted, and really the backbone of national security is at stake. If that information falls into the wrong hands, then the consequences could be catastrophic. So what are they looking for? They're looking for federal contract information, or FCI. They're looking for CUI, controlled unclassified information. They're also looking for covered defense information and controlled technical information, which really, the technical information is the gold for the cybersecurity criminals and the nation state actors that are looking for that R&D, that technical edge that, you know, we spend so much money here in America to try to be the best in the world at warfighting. And so these threats are coming from the inside. They're, you know, coming from anybody who does business, including but not limited to third-party vendors that are out there. And so securing the FCI, the CUI, the CDI, and the CTI is really a way that CMMC and NIST 800-171 have come to life, and at a perfect time to do so.